All right. Welcome back, man. I'm really excited to be starting this YouTube series off. Um, Real quick, what this is going to be is talking about specific players in this draft cycle and the questions surrounding them that everybody wants the answer to, right? I'm doing my best to break down the film and give the answers to those questions. The first one is Jahmyr Gibbs. Is this kid the next Alvin Kamara, right? 5'9", 199-pound running back out of Alabama. Is this kid the next Alvin Kamara? We've been hearing this a lot during draft season and also from general managers and people in the league and throughout the league have been comparing him to an Alvin Kamara-like player. Is that warranted? Let's take a look. First, when we look at Gibbs, the one thing to notice is the multi-dimension ability he has as a receiver, right? This guy can detach from the formation. He can be split out wide, be put in the slot. He spent 19% of his snaps out wider in the slot this past season at Alabama. And when we look at Jahmyr Gibbs, the one commonality he does have with Kamara is this is a chain moving back out of the backfield as well as detached from the formation. The one route I love that Gibbs runs, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more at length because of how he runs it, is the arrow route. Kamara, very good at running angle and option routes. Arrow route, similar to an angle route, but we're looking at getting more vertical up the field rather than kind of pinching that back towards the opposite boundary. So with Gibbs, we kind of look back here. This is kind of where he's pretty unique. This angle right here, this low to the ground right shin, is utilized as a propulsive mechanism to get him into the middle of the field vertically, right? As a propulsive mechanism into acceleration. So that's what he wants to do. This is hard to do. This is not something that if you watch running backs run routes similar to this or angle routes, this is tough. This is not something that's common in the NFL or in collegiate football to watch backs do this, right? This is a high level maneuver. So when doing this, we see him come through that center of mass, start accelerating upfield. The difference between Gibbs and a lot of backs is the separation he can create on these routes in the first 2-3 steps. We kind of go back a little bit to how he sets this up. He uses head shoulders, the kind of fake boundary side opportunity, right? This big left angle here. Defender always going to look at the big bite, right? So he does this, comes across, and how quickly he gets 10 yards up the field. Bryce Young throws an accurate ball, and it's a 20-plus yard pitch and catch. This is a huge staple of Gibbs's game and a way that he can contribute immediately to the next level. Again, this is a guy who can play out in the slot. You can leave him out wide and empty and contribute as a third option out there. So I think this is a big part of his game. Kamara a bit different as a receiver, but a little bit similar in how they can impact the game as chain movers. But Kamara is more of a middle of the field savant. I think Gibbs can attack more vertically because of his play speed, right? Kamara is more of a pure accelerator. Gibbs has better play speed as we get further along in distance, and I think that's a way where he can really impact the game offensively. And then we kind of look at, as well as a receiver, what something they do that's also common is how they can both be one-play touchdown guys, right? When an NFL team is drafting Jahmyr Gibbs, this is one of the special traits that he has, is he can turn any play into a one-play touchdown. When you draft a player like Gibbs, what you're looking at is you're putting him at what's called the W position, the weapon position. This is not a guy who's going to be carrying the ball for you 20, 25 times a game. This is going to be an athlete you're putting in advantageous situations and making sure that he's getting the ball in space, which is where he operates best. So this is a similar play to what we saw with Alvin Kamara, I believe, a couple years ago against the Green Bay Packers. This is funny because right when I watched this play, it took me right back to Kamara's play against the Packers. Reason being is this. Although they can create space differently, they still create a ton of space. Gibbs, if we kind of slow this down, first, notice the hands catch. That's great to see from a running back. What I like is this. Peripheral, sees the left side defender coming up, but his eyes are to him. His eyes are the defenders close to the boundary. But with how quick he is and how he can transition, change direction to acceleration and vice versa, and just play around and oscillate with those, that's such a hard engagement for a defender to make. And he's a guy, too, we look at these two defenders. This you see a lot with Gibbs because he's more of a back, and we'll talk about it a bit later when we talk about their through contact skill sets. Gibbs is someone who slips and slides off of contact and negates it rather than a guy like Kamara who bounces pinballs and can dip his shoulder through contact and into contact. That's a bit different, right? A guy like Gibbs is so good at countering indirect contact, but direct contact, he kind of struggles with at times. Kamara, all around one of the best through contact backs is this next generation. And that shows up on Kamara's tape if you watch him even collegiately at Tennessee. So this is the fun part about Gibbs. He wins with his feet, not with his eyes. He can just slip and slide and get through these different engagements on different quadrants of the field. This is why for an NFL team to invest in Gibbs, you're investing on getting this guy in space. Right, he does well with closures of space, but he is best, and in my opinion, the best in-space player in this whole entire draft cycle with the ball in his hands. And that's the thing that Gibbs does extremely well. And when you watch him in a more condensed area, this is something, too, we kind of see the Kamara type skill set come into play, but Kamara would handle this engagement a little bit differently. And what I mean by that is Gibbs here, we can kind of see the stoppage of feet, right? The mirror, looking at that second level defender, looking at zero right here. I'm gonna put my cursor on this one to slow this one down a bit, not go full screen. Looking at that and mirroring that second level defender, right? That's the free defender here. What I like what Gibbs does is he's really patient as a runner. That's something he does really well. He's not overly physical. But behind the line of scrimmage, he makes good decisions. And when he is decisive, he can accelerate extremely quickly to the second level. So we kind of speed this up, like that low shin angle coming out, boom, nice and acute. And then here, right? This is a 3-on-1, one option engagement. Your only option is to go to the butt of 54 and 70. But what I love is how he can go from complete stop to we see that whip-like propulsive action here. We see the same angle of operation as we saw in the first clip with Gibbs as a receiver against Texas. Able to dip shoulder, get inside 54 and 70, and then it's the ability to negate contact that we see with Gibbs, right? We see this left shoulder dipping towards boundary. He's trying to get towards the numbers so he can get away from contact. We see this a lot with Gibbs. When we talk about, hey, this kid is not a great through contact back. He lacks power. It's not that he lacks power. It's that at 199 pounds, this is not going to be a skill set for him that he has in his game. Alvin Kamara, 215 pounds, has power to his game with the way he takes contact on. Gibbs, for example, watch here. Watch the arm, right? He's negating the contact attempt of the defender number 71 was on. Able to negate it. And then, two, the stopping, the deceleration. Able to stop, pivot, get inside, get an additional 5-6 yards. With Kamara, the difference is here, I think, in decision-making, too. It's this engagement. Kamara is more than likely going to bend path immediately and try to get through number 28. That's the difference between Gibbs and Kamara as an in-space player. Kamara knows he's such a good back through direct contact and through any type of contact, that he is going to take those engagements head on instead of trying to deflect and negate like Gibbs does. Gibbs still can create yards with that, but we're going to see a lot of stopping, starting, darting in and out, and changing direction with Gibbs. Kamara more so will be able to go through people and get to the second, third level of a defense because he's broken 3-4 tackles at a time, right? I think the number one play that stands out was a screen pass. If you look at Kamara's rookie season with the Saints, it was against the Rams. Took a screen pass, and I think Tony Romo was on the call, and he was befuddled that he wasn't tackled 3 different times, right? And that's what Kamara does very differently than Gibbs. And here as well, this is a play too. I'll full screen this guy. This is what Jahmyr Gibbs can do that, in my opinion, no other back in this class can do with his type of fluidity. That's the key word I'm going to circle with Gibbs here. It's the fluidity combined with the controlled acceleration and then the blazing top-end speed. Gibbs is a guy who's reached 22.5 miles an hour on the field of play. You watch his 40-yard dash and you break that down and take those numbers, almost 24.6 miles an hour in his 40, right? A guy like Kamara, this is where the Kamara comparison is not exactly a one-of-one. Kamara is a back who's only reached 21.1 miles an hour on the field of play and below 22.5 miles an hour in his 40-yard dash, right? Very different. We get to long speed and we get to max velocity and peak velocity here. Gibbs is the back that will offer that and be able to sustain velocity for a longer period of time. So we look at this play here. Also something to note too with Jahmyr Gibbs. He is an almost exclusive shotgun back. Another big difference between him and Kamara. Kamara has ran a lot under center, especially this past season with Pete Carmichael at home. With Gibbs, he is almost exclusively a shotgun-based back, right? Outside zone, inside zone, I think he works best, and I think he's also a good gap scheme player because of how well he reads second-level engagements. But I think that's a big deal when we're talking about the goal line opportunities that Gibbs likely will not get. We've seen Alvin Kamara, right? 16 total touchdowns, 14 touchdowns, 8 touchdowns. Kamara was a player, and I don't think he's the same player because of the Carmichael offense versus the Peyton offense, was such a good red zone back, low red zone back, one of the best in the NFL and one of the best in the past decade, in my opinion, at decision-making and the ability to get north and south when he needs to and wants to. That's a Kamara trait. Gibbs is not going to be a 10-plus touchdown back. Kamara's done it, I think, twice in his career already on the ground. That's not Jahmyr Gibbs. But what Gibbs does offer an offense is his ability to be really efficient on shotgun runs, right? I think this last season of his 151 runs that came out of shotgun, he averaged 6.5 yards a carry, 6.6 to be exact. So let's take a look at this run. This is where I love Jahmyr Gibbs. We talk about the shoulders, right? We talk about getting inside, getting skinny. Again, indirect contact attempt from number 10 gets through it. Indirect contact attempt from the D tackle gets through it. But this is what I like. He's getting small with his pads. Slips through at the left shoulder. But then after that, no catching him. No safety on the plan is catching Jahmyr Gibbs in the open field. Goodbye and good night. And when you watch this game against the Arkansas Razorbacks, what you have to take into account is, look who's back there. Jalen Milroe, right? This was the Jahmyr Gibbs show in this game. He had over 200 yards, I think over 220 yards total, dang near. And this is when Bryce Young was banged up. When you watch players who you kind of question, can this guy be an elite producer, an elite weapon at the next level? You watch and kind of see, was there a stretch of games when they took over? And was there one game where you can kind of hang your hat and say, just watch this tape? And that's the Arkansas game for me with Gibbs, right? We talk about what he did against the Razorbacks and the ability to take over that game. Bryce Young is hurt. You relied on Jahmyr Gibbs to create offense for you in that 3-game stretch when Bryce Young was not the same player because of the injury. Jahmyr Gibbs averaged 154 yards per game on the ground on 24 touches. Volume, in my opinion, is not going to be a giant issue with Gibbs. We talk about, well, he's smaller. He's not a big volume guy. Well, Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler, Aaron Jones, those guys kind of the same body type frame and are volume guys, not because they can quote unquote handle it, because I think we take weight way too much into account when we're talking about NFL athletes. But big deal here is you want these guys in the field to touch the ball. In 61% of games this year, or throughout his whole entire career, Jahmyr Gibbs touched the ball 15 plus times. 61% of games, 15 plus times. Christian McCaffrey was at 64% in college. Dalvin Cook was in the 60s. James Conner, a bigger back, was in the 60s. You want those guys in the field to touch the ball, right? Big weapon as a playmaker, and that's what Jahmyr Gibbs really brings to the table here. I think with his play speed, his intellect, and that's something we haven't touched on a ton, but I don't want to go too long here. Just the ability to think and feel what is coming next, combine that with the athletic attributes that he has. This is a guy that is a unique player, but not like Alvin. He's not Alvin Kamara. Not the through contact savant that Kamara is. He's not the low red zone generational talent, in my opinion, that Kamara is. But he's a different player. You can detach him from the formation. You can line him up out wide, put him in the slot. He's that weapon that elite offenses need in order to take that next step in beating teams like the Kansas City Chiefs. So I think the Philadelphia Eagles, with how much they run empty and how they need that big play guy out of the backfield now that Miles Sanders is gone, that's a perfect fit for him. When we talk about fantasy, PPR, what do we think in terms of Gibbs' outlook long term? Kind of the Kamara comparison comes back, because I think from a production standpoint, the first 5 years of Kamara's career, he was a top 10 PPR back, averaged 72 receptions per season, and 4 seasons with 94 more targets. The thing, too, is Kamara has never topped 950 yards rushing. I don't see Gibbs doing that as well. I think Gibbs is not going to be a 1,000-yard rusher, maybe ever. I think he's around 700 yards on the ground annually. But like Kamara, I think he can be a 500-plus yard receiver, giving you 1,200 to 1,500 total yards a season. The touchdowns where it's going to be a little bit different. I don't think Jahmyr Gibbs is a 15-plus touchdown guy. I'd be shocked if he saw 10 in the season in his career. But the value of Gibbs is going to be his per season average in terms of receptions and targets. Kamara, like I said, 4 seasons with 94 more targets. I think Jahmyr Gibbs has a 100-plus target ceiling with how good he is as a receiver and how you can utilize him as a traditional receiver in the slot or on the boundary. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is the second best running back in this class behind Bijan Robinson, who's the best running back prospect in the last decade, in my opinion. But I think in terms of a PPR asset, I think Jahmyr Gibbs is RB2 in this class and is someone that could potentially going to be a top 8 running back in fantasy for the next 5 to 8 years in terms of his career. And I think he might have a little longer career than that because of the low red zone usage. Probably won't be there. That's a good thing and a bad thing, blessing and a curse. I don't think he gets beat up as much in the low red zone and can kind of negate those touches for him, and he can stay a little bit healthier, hopefully. So thank you so much for watching. Like, subscribe, do all that stuff. And check out Angelo Analysis, man. All of this content is on Angelo Analysis in written form. Grades, draft guide, and player profiles are on there. I hope you enjoyed. I'll link that stuff below. Take care and see you next time.